today's video I will do a sort of complete recap of all the concepts of dynamic modeling. Dynamic modeling recap. So, where did we start with dynamic modeling? So, some simple basic kinetic models. Michaelis-Menten. We did briefly look at Hill and various types of inhibition. Right. So, essentially the logic was the same in all cases. Draw a sort of wiring diagram, figure out what are all the interactions, qualify every interaction with some kinetic equations, and then assemble a bunch of equations, differential equations. So, then ODEs, right. How did our ODE system look like? Right, where X is your m cross 1 vector, m equals number of metabolites, S stoichiometric matrix which has negative coefficients for reactants in a reaction and positive stoichiometric coefficients for products in the same reaction. So, this is an m cross n or let us say R matrix where R equals number of reactions and V is obviously going to be an n cross 1 vector or R cross 1 vector. So, if you have all the reactions written down for any given system, let us say you have R1, R2, R3 and so on with involving metabolites. Let us say a simple example would be dA, B, C, D by dt equals some minus 1 plus 1 0 0 0 minus 1 plus 1 0 0 0 minus 1 plus 1 minus 1 0 0 1 right into V1, V2, V3, V4. Here I have the same number of metabolites and reactions. So, what are my reactions if I were to reconstruct from here? A giving B, B giving C, C giving D and A giving D. Is that clear? It is from this matrix, right. So, this matrix is essentially you have to think of it as A, B, C, D and V1, V2, V3, V4 where the V's correspond to every reaction, every given reaction. R1, V1 is the rate of R1, V2 is the rate of R2 and so on. What is V1? What is that? dA by dt which is
K into B, K into A.
So, K1 into A. V2 K2 into B. If something is reversible then you have other things to worry about. So, but this is literally your entire framework. This is all you need to know for dynamic modeling, right. You have a system of reactions, you write it out in this form, you then for each individual velocity you can compute it in this fashion and you stick all these back into these equations, your differential equations and then solve the ODEs. How do you solve them? You have Euler methods, you have Runge-Kutta methods, or best. What is adaptive?
Varying scale to adapt.
Varying delta t, right. So, all your methods basically use some f of x plus delta t minus f of x by delta t and so on, right, or rather we would say f of x dx by dt equals f of x equals x of t plus delta t minus x of t by delta t. You use this and the x naught value to predict x at different places. So, you essentially have to reconstruct the curve based on the slopes known at different points. Right. So, for this you use several solvers. Fair enough. And you also have to worry about stiff equations, which is what these solvers are good at taking care of. So, stiff equations typically involve several time scales. So, you need to have the varying delta t's to actually combat them. And then we looked at cost function. We basically said we have to worry about several things. First thing is, as one of you mentioned, trends in the data. I might be more interested in trends in the data rather than just the data, and we said suppose your data points are like this, I will not say that this is the best curve, all these curves, okay, both these curves are equally good. Maybe the first one passes through the means, but the second one passes more or less close to the standard deviations at least, right. So, both of them capture the spread of the data. So, we had to account for the varying standard deviation at different points. First thing is scaling, right. So, we said we will do x m I minus x p I of theta by x m I, right. We said that may not be good enough. So, different points may have different error bars. So, you want to account for that, and you may be less worried about the steady state than the initial action. So, you may want to put something else to account for that as well, and we will square this and sum across all the data points. This is your error cost function for any given parameter set theta. How do you find these parameter sets? Parameter estimation or optimization. We looked at a battery of methods, especially focusing on evolutionary algorithms. Right. So, this in some sense encapsulates dynamic modeling, and there is actually another nice NPTEL course on dynamic modeling by Biplab Bose, which I think you can take a look at, because it pays specific attention to say modeling signaling networks, what are the how do you model positive feedback, negative feedback, those kinds of things in greater detail. Here in this course what we have essentially looked at is there is a method to model these systems. You essentially set up these kinds of equations, apply the appropriate kind of kinetics for every given reaction, and then directly go into parameter estimation and so on. So, I have not gone into the depth of the math of modeling these systems. So, if you look at a classic math bio course, you will also look at things like predator prey models, Lotka-Volterra models. They are more classic models, or the classic dynamical systems course will look at bifurcation, phase plane analysis, things like that. Those are all the other things that you may want to study if you want to look deeper into math modeling or dynamic modeling. But I think for systems biology, these are the more important concepts that you need to worry about. And typically you will be doing a lot of parameter estimation. A biologist will come to you with some data and some system and say I want a model. So, you will have to build a model using some of these concepts and then you will have to estimate parameters. So, in today's video I hope you had a good recap of dynamic modeling, and there is a lot more to dynamic modeling than what we have discussed in this course. I encourage you to go back and read about many of these things. I have also shared a lot of resources and papers that one can read. In the next video we will switch over to a lab session wherein we will use MATLAB and try to compute the error for a given set of data, compute the objective function that you want to minimize essentially, and also use this very classic MATLAB optimizer known as fmin search.